Hi, I'm Mike Cardis from Organization Development by Mike Cardis. And today we're going to work through the Dealing with Difficult Team Members webinar and clarify the 12 archetypes and ways to work through this. This is a little more content heavy than my other webinars because I'm going to work through some pretty clear content and we have areas to look at positives, negatives, and some ideas on how to kind of work with those challenging archetypes. Now, many of you know that people are not that stereotypical. So these ideas help you make progress and figure things out, and then you may have to determine what's best for that person. So let me go into shared screen. Make this big. All right. So like I said, following this, I will email this entire PowerPoint off to you. Also a longer article that has all the archetypes broken down. You can work through them. And additionally, you'll have a chance to reach out to me. You know, people sometimes fall into these areas. It's helpful to look at this and determine how to work best with these individuals. So the first thing is, when you're thinking about this, is identifying that in every team, you're going to have good and bad parts. Some parts will be effective and be helpful, and some parts will be dysfunctional and challenging. And as you're thinking about the dysfunctional pieces, you have to keep identifying, is the person just being difficult? Meaning, can they do the work they're choosing not to, or are they busy, or are there other processes here? So keep thinking about, before you choose to see the person as a bad apple or being broken, consistently think about, is a system in place to encourage good work to take place? And if that happens, also look at yourself, be a little reflective upon your leadership and your skill sets, and kind of say, what can I do to help folks do better? The one thing that we see in all relationship processes, especially inside teams and organizations, is that you can't expect the other person to change. Oftentimes, you have to break that loop and find a way to kind of upset the current balance to make things be different. So in this, when you're having a challenging team member or a challenging person on the team, what do? First thing, you return back to the goals, roles, and procedures. There's a typical team model that I'll also email the group called GRIPPY. GRIPPY is goals, G is goals, R is roles, P is procedure, I is interpersonal relationships. And the model says that the first part you'll be thoughtful about is, if people are acting in negative ways or ways that are, we'll say, being disruptive to teamwork getting done, you go back and you look at the procedures. Are the procedures clear? Do we know meeting management? Do we have documentation in place? Do we have ways to clarify the roles and who's doing what? If procedures are clear, then we look at the roles. Is there role clarity? Do I know what my role is? Does Sushil know what his role is? Does Jessica know what her role is? Do we know the roles? Role clarification is important because, again, if I don't know what my role is, I may act outside my role or think that my role is broader or narrower than it actually is, and that will cause challenges. And they say, if the roles are clear, go up to the goals. Are the team goals known? Are they shared? Are they understood? Are the pieces there? Next part is try to figure out the team member's behavior. So take a second, and as we go through the 12 archetypes today, you can kind of sort of say, this person behaving in the following way, here's some ideas. Look for cooperation and the positive side of the behavior and build off that. This is a lot of my solution-focused work coming in. It's sort of saying that while there may be challenging parts, if we keep looking for the bad, we're going to find the bad. And so you got to stop and sort of say, if this person's on my team and they are part of my team group and I can't do much to change their behavior, I can start looking for the small things that work and build off those pieces. There's a lot of examples of this we'll walk through later on. But one example I think about is I was working with a document management team. They scanned documents and stored, they used to store like CDs of like information for large government organizations. And the operations director and the IT director didn't get along really well. They called each other names. There was a lot of fighting going on. And I pulled them both aside separately, and I asked them, is there ever a time when the other person was useful and helpful to you getting your work done? And they both had examples. I said, walk me through that example. What was different? How did it work? And I had them begin to define how they approach the other person differently to get the work done and be more effective. So think about that. If there are times the person has been a challenge in the past, and you could think of examples when they've been useful or when they've been helpful in the past, try to find those examples. If you can't find the examples personally, you may want to ask somebody else how they work with that person. Try the suggested ideas. So we're going to walk through the steps coming on in the webinar. Treat the person as a competent adult, worthy your full respect and attention. Realize that I'm going to say sort of, especially now, as a lot of us are working from home. There's a lot more stress on us with kids and families and challenges going on. Just be patient, show some empathy. Don't treat the person as a child. Don't be pejorative. Don't put them down. Don't be mean. Just try to kind of say, how can I come to this person as a respecting adult and sort of say, the work is not getting done, or hey, you and I are having a challenge, can we work through this? When you need to do something about the behavior during a team meeting, we're going to walk through steps and kind of how to deal with this. So these here are the 12 archetypes. I'm going to walk through these in sequence, which is going to sort of be just me reading it and talking about them. And as I go through them, just think about examples you've had in your life or folks you've worked with before who met these archetypes and these team members. The challenging part is you may have all kinds of team members on your team, but trying to find small ways to make things better and to handle that will help you. Additionally, I've used a lot of these with groups before that I work with. So in my work varies from anywhere from like pre-cash startup groups to grassroots nonprofits up to multi-billion-dollar organizations and military contracts. And all of these tend to kind of come out. Now, maybe because I'm stereotype biasing my work, but again, to have some heuristics or some rules of thumb to deal with the individual to help is helpful in the team process. So the first one is the veteran. So the veteran has seen and experienced all. This is your person that's been there for years. They've seen all the challenges. Typically, they're relatively change resistant, which is the negative part. But the positive part is they have knowledge and experience that can be helpful. So I'm working right now with an organization, and their CEO has been there for 40-something years. Their director team has been, the newest director of the organization has been there 22 years. And they're very change resistant, only because they've seen everything. So when I have a new idea, they go, we tried that in 1984, and so it's hard. So what do? You ask for, accept, and use their knowledge as a benefit to the team. When people are veterans, they have good knowledge, capture that, use that to help the team. Summarize what they shared precisely as they shared it, and then move on. Take the information, capture it, move on. Delegate task projects that allow them to contribute and serve as a knowledge expert in some capacity. If you have the veteran, let them use their knowledge, but keep their role as a knowledge expert. Ask for input from others with different experiences. This is also the way to kind of identify if you have experts or veterans on your team. You want to have multiple experts or multiple veterans to give you feedback to do the best of the process. Next one, the perfectionist. This is the team member who, if we think about it, is really high in conscientiousness, but everything must be perfect, from grammar to work to quality, all those sort of things. And if you're leading an innovation team or a rapid iteration team, this can be really challenging. So the negative part of their behavior is they can be sometimes rather impractical, and they can slow everything down because of their need for perfection. They have a vision, and they ensure the necessary details must be perfect before the project is complete. The benefit is they fix the grammar errors. They fix the coding errors. They catch those errors that are going out to the customer that you may not catch. So ways to deal with it. Focus on shared goals. Again, come back to identifying what the goals are and what's together in the process. Remind them of the quality and time frame of the goals at certain stages of the work. With this piece, this is when if we're doing goal setting with the team members, the methodology I oftentimes use is called QQTR. I'll email this. Q stands for quality, Q stands for quantity, T is time frame, R is resources. Meaning at this stage of the project, how much quality work do I need? So an example would be if I was working with a company that had website developers, and when the graphic designers were creating work for the client to see, sometimes the designers would spend hours and hours making perfect details for clients to see before the client gave feedback. And then when the project manager told the designer, hey, we don't need this much work, we just need a draft, the designer got upset because they wanted to be a certain way. So clarifying how good the quality of the work has to be at that point will help get things better framed in the process. Ask for practical ideas, small progress steps that are realistic and don't take up a lot of time. Ask Ask others to build on their ideas involving other team members. Will help focus on what the person needs, and do not allow others to complete the tasks. Sorry, let me just fix one thing really quick. I saw somebody just had their hand up. Was there a hand that was up? Does somebody have a question that sort of popped up really quick, or did I just see something out of my eye? Okay, I'll keep going. Sorry. Perfectionist. This next one is a pain in the neck. Consistently argumentative. Every slight change, task, or work expectation is a huge ordeal. Personally, I find these folks to be relatively challenging in my own personal experience. It's hard. Yet again, you have to be thoughtful about how can I work with this person. Right? The negative part is they cause conflict and they cause the team to lose focus on the task at hand. So if you're trying to clarify customer needs or make sure that the data analysis is getting out and this person keeps wanting to cause fights, you need to keep them in line and arraign them to figure out how can I positively use these individuals. The good thing is they bring up opposing viewpoints and alternative viewpoints. This is a person that feels relatively high in what we call psychological safety. So they feel okay and they're comfortable in sharing their ideas and opinions. Again, it can be helpful to the team or it can be damaging to the team. What to do? Stick to the agenda and use it as a tool to refocus this person and the team. So come back and sort of say, I know right now is the challenging part, but here's a timeline, here's the dates, here's the frames we have to work on. Keep working on those areas. Listen, respect, and summarize their concerns and move on. Again, treat them as an adult. Make sure their word is heard, but listen to them. Show them respect, show them areas. Steer discussions to feelings of the team. This is when if you can sort of get the team to talk about their feelings, they may see things differently, but now you're utilizing the team to give social pressure or social feedback on this individual. Attempt to negotiate some of their ideas for some of the team's plans, but use this wisely, because again, the hard part might be with this archetype. Sometimes if you start giving in to their concerns or their demands too early on, it may off-roll the entire project, and now you're behind date and behind quality. So with this one, be thoughtful about how do you still treat the person as an individual worthy of your respect and clarify things that get done. Next, the Rambler. This is the person that talks nonstop. So I think about some of my work inside government, state and federal government, and how a lot of times the directors or deputy directors do tend to ramble. Typically, it's men in suits who talk for long periods of time, who don't get anything clearly put together. The negative part is the Rambler, they take up time and they can cause the team to lose focus. The good part is they can relieve tension in the team, meaning they can get the team to kind of work through things and clarify tasks. So what do? Acknowledge and take advantage of their experience. So to say, hey, you have good ideas. I acknowledge that. It's really helpful. Let's keep moving on. Provide feedback about their impact on the team. They may not know it. This is the part of pulling the person aside and talking to them and saying, hey, hey, Joe, in the meetings, when you start rambling for a long period of time about the tasks and the work you did in 1937 and 1974, it takes the team off topic. If you talk to them, that may be helpful. Also, the next part is interrupt. If you're the team lead and running a team project, don't be afraid to interrupt. Just kind of say, that's enough, we heard you, let's move forward. That helps people put themselves back into place sometimes. This last one, avoid eye contact or call on others. This is a weird one, but sometimes people see eye contact as a chance to sort of keep talking. So if the person keeps talking and rambling, call on somebody else, avoid eye contact with them. Next one, the Legalist. Everything the team does must follow the rules exactly as stated. That's a little different than the Perfectionist. The Perfectionist wants everything to be perfect and sort of make sure no details left out. The Legalist wants to ensure that it follows all procedures and processes and that everything is done exactly to the letter as it must be. So the negative part is they can be uncompromising and stubborn, mainly because they have good legal references to support their actions. The positive part is they enforce procedures and ensures things are done right. So my work inside nonprofits and groups that are highly regulated, this is a challenging one. Normally, if we're working on a project or trying to clarify things, Sorry. If we're working on a project and trying to clarify things, and we ask for things to be done differently, we'll hear things like, that can't be done, regulation XYZ says we have to follow the following procedure. And sometimes a way to work with that is to, is to ask them. Say, can you show me inside the policy and procedure where it actually says we can't do that? And work with the process. Some ways to work with this person. Look for help from the team and peers. Utilize your team. Remember, you're not alone in this process. You have team members who can help you out in the process, in the work, and can move things ahead. Use open-ended questions like, what if we didn't do it this way? Or in what ways can we complete the project and still follow procedures? So in this, you're reframing the process to kind of say, well, what if we did it this way? Is it still inside the guidelines? Brainstorm with the team to generate solutions. Assign them tasks that require strict adherence to the rules. So if you have a legalist on your team and you know some things do have to be filled out correctly, whether it's environmental regulations, state mandated guidelines, legal restrictions, give them that work to work on and make sure they're part of the task. Next one's the mediator. The mediator is a calmer one in the group, where it tries to resolve all the team conflicts. And while sometimes we think this can be a helpful role, it also removes the creative tension or that discourse that happens inside the team to move things forward. So the negative part of the mediator is they prevent productive conflict and rarely share their ideas because they're conflict avoidant. They don't share their ideas. The positive thing is they help them manage the team conflict. So in teams, you want to have a healthy use of conflict. People should feel comfortable fighting, not like fist fighting, but arguing over the ideas, having a healthy discussion about where it looks, where we're going to go, how things ought to be. If that is pushed down too much, or if people feel that by them raising their voice or challenging the ideas, they're making somebody else upset, that can halt progress and make the team go apathetic. So some ideas: encourage consensus. So ask the team to kind of say, how do we feel about this? What can we do? That may kind of help them, the mediator, share their ideas and share their processes. Ask for their opinion. So as the mediator is going through the work and the ideas, ask them directly what they think about this. Consistently pull them out of the meeting and figure out what they need and how they get things done. Set time for discussions and encourage alternative viewpoints. So if the person knows this and there's going to be a challenge, make sure you have time set aside for the ideas to kind of come up. Also with the mediator, if you find a conflict avoidance, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll make time with them outside the meeting and ask them their opinions prior to the meeting or clarify that. That will help them get their ideas put forth and get the process moving forward. Powermonger. Powermonger one, again, is if I think about these across the spectrum, this one also can be challenging to work with. And a lot of times, unfortunately, many times in teams, the powermonger tends to get the positions of leadership and promotion just because of the structure, and that may not be helpful. The powermonger is always working to assume authority and take over the team. They always feel a need to take over the discussion and the work. So they're folks who want to kind of have things pulled in themselves and be seen as a powerful part of the team. So the negative part, they focus on self-promotion and they often think other team members are lazy, dumb, or less competent. I'm sure you've heard this before of other powermongers, right? So suddenly they pull you aside and they say, and they go, hey, Juanita, so I'm working with Jack over here and Jack's just an idiot and he can't get work done. They're trying to create more power to themselves. The good thing is the person wants to succeed and to be seen as successful inside the team. So what do? Talk with them. Tell them, hey, when you behave this way and you try to take over the team meeting, you make it hard for us to get work done. Can you please stop that? You can always have those discussions. The person may not take it well, but at least you can say you did your best to make a change in the process. And if things keep continuing in the way they're negative with any of these archetypes, you have tools inside your organization to kind of work on these, and I'll clarify those a little later. Restate and clarify the goal. Come back to the goal. So to say the goal of the project is this, here's your role, here's the process, how can we keep you involved in this? Return to roles and procedures. Actively ask others for contribution. You'll see that's a consistent theme in all these archetypes, making sure others have a voice. Recognize them for team-oriented contributions. So here you're trying to kind of create positive reinforcement for things you want them to do. So with a Powermonger, if you want them to work better as a team, keep reorienting them or giving them reinforcement for team tasks. The silent type. This is the person who is relatively quiet in the team and doesn't contribute. This may be your strong introvert. And generally we know from introversion and extroversion, introverts tend to get energy from being alone. Extroverts get their energy from being amongst others. And sometimes we'll see in teams based upon the organization, and I'm going to sort of slightly stereotype or bias here. A lot of times in my like IT teams or engineering teams, or my teams of people who are from multiple cultures, countries, so culturally diverse teams, you may find some folks are less likely to speak out than others. So be thoughtful about that. The challenging part is the team does not benefit from the input. It's hard to know if they're committed to the decision. The good part is they enforce procedures. So typically the silent person is good at following procedures and they know what they should do. So what do? Control members who dominate. So if you have your Powermongers and your veterans and your sort of raging bulls, which are in the process, are kind of going off and clarifying things, pull those folks back. Keep some control around them. So make sure there's time for folks to share ideas. Ask every member to write down their own ideas. Use open-ended questions, encourage participation, do a round robin, and ask each team member for contributions. One thing that I've been doing, and I'm going to say more about this at the end, especially now with virtual teams, is we've been having team members do a lot more work and a lot more brainstorming asynchronously or on their own time, and then send me the ideas. And so I'm going to talk about that at the end and share examples of how that's being helpful to do all these kind of challenges. Is having folks, instead of working face to face, try to find new ways or ways to have folks document things, and you go through the ideas and kind of get the discussions going on. Next one, the disengaged member. This is the team member who has lost interest, or maybe never had interest in the team's work, meeting, or efforts. So sometimes this might be the person who is forced on your team, so they don't want to be there, meaning they're placed there by their manager or somebody else to be in the group, or they just sort of lost interest in the team, so they lost trust or their role is not clear. So when you're thinking about this, the one thing to be thoughtful of, the negative part is they create resentment. So amongst other team members, and they bring negative energy to the team. This is the fully apathetic team member, and it's hard. The good thing is they can serve as an indicator the team has reached burnout or overload. So in an earlier webinar I did on the team performance model, we saw that when team members are reaching this overload or disharmony, when they're feeling that they're kind of off, they become disengaged, one thing that indicates, again, is that the disengagement shows that they may have too much work going on or they feel overloaded, and you have to kind of go back and figure out who this person is and what they're doing there, and if they still ought to be part of that team, or if you can change your work around a little bit. So one thing is determine what motivates this person. Sometimes you can pull them aside and just ask them, hey, I see you're having a challenging time on the team. What sort of things do you want to do? How can we motivate you? Ask them for ideas and suggestions on how to complete some of the work, get them involved, acknowledge what's happening, don't ignore it, hope we'll stop. So if you're finding that, Mike, I'm on your team and I'm starting to not be as engaged as I used to be, just ask me about it, see if everything's okay. Delegate relatively concrete goals, things that can be achievable and they're small and they're task oriented. That will help the person become re-engaged. You may never get the person back engaged in the process, but at least you can get the work done and utilize and move forward. Next one, the raging bull. This is just this one is, I've coached internally inside some banking organizations and some military groups and some government organizations, these raging bulls. And these are folks who just kind of get really angry and they scream and they get really hostile at folks, and they can be scary. But additionally, they can really get the team off track. They can, there's personal attacks, they can be divisive and upsetting to certain members. The good part is they can encourage useful conflict. So some ways to work on this are use conflict management approaches. You gotta know how to work with this. So I recommend if you're having a raging bull on your team, you do look into some conflict management work. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. So like Crucial Conversations is a good book. Another good book would be like Radical Candor. There's a bunch of good books and good workshops out there on conflict management and ways to kind of deal with this. But again, if the person is being outright hostile, you got to find ways to kind of ameliorate this or get the person back into work or separate them from the team. Go back to emphasizing common goals. Focus on the team and the common goals. They can get things done. Remind them we're all in this together. Work with the person to figure out what's causing the anger, right? Protect targeted team members. If certain folks, if the raging bull is being a bully, they're just attacking team members, you have to figure out a way to kind of deal with that and get this person and make sure folks aren't being attacked. Last thing, and this is one of my strongest recommendations, if somebody is being that hostile, you get them deselected from the team. By deselection, what I mean is that if you are a team leader, one of the things you have to have is the authority and the accountability to deselect team members who are no longer being useful. So if Joy is on your team and Joy is screaming and yelling at team members in a meeting, you should have the ability to go to HR or go to your manager and say, I no longer want this person on my team. The best thing to do with the raging bull is kind of get them away. So not enough time, team member. This is the person that's always sort of rushing for tasks. They can't get things done. There's never enough time for the work to get done. This could be because they're really busy or they're just bad at time management, but you got to figure it out. Number one, negative part. They can lead to quick rush decisions or prevent the team from getting what's needed or buying for the ideas. So again, if I'm always rushed, I'm gonna make rush decisions. The good part is they help keep the team on the agenda and time frames, and they keep the projects done. So again, because they're time constraints, they keep the team focused. First thing is develop a time contract with the direct manager and them. Stick to the meeting agenda. This is part two. Another part that I think about with teams is as you're creating your team charter or your team scope or your team goals and procedures, it's useful to be clear on how much time you're going to need from the team member. So in some companies, in some projects, you can say, for example, we're doing change product X, or we're developing new product Y, or we're putting procedure Q into place. Of the team member, if you're meeting with me, say, Mike, I'm going to need 3 hours of your time per month. And then I can negotiate and determine if that's a useful time for me to put towards a project. If I can't do that and you need the work to get done, then it's nice to be able to go to my manager and say, I need Mike for 3 hours per month or per week. Can you give me that time? And that's the challenge. You have to figure out how much time can go towards these tasks. Unfortunately, sometimes the not enough time team member is a team member who is very popular and gets work done, and everyone wants them on their team. So you got to figure out, how do you work with this? One way to do it, again, is create a time contract. Agree upon time, agree upon hours. If you can't get 3 hours, you can only get an hour and a half out of that person, make do with that. Assigning the timekeeper role, right? Ask them to help negotiate the time with their manager. Big kahuna. This is when you have an executive or senior person or somebody who operates above the team. So if you have a senior person, an executive advisor, a board member, if you're in a nonprofit, if they're on your team and they have too many other important things to do, negative part is they can inhibit the team, meaning they don't get the work done. So again, if you have, let's say you have a CEO of a large organization and he's working on your team, reality is he or she may not get the work done, mainly because they're super busy, they got a lot going on, and that's the challenging part. What they do is they lend the team power and stature. So if a senior team member is on your group and she is there lending power, it makes your team and your work seem really important. That helps you get more resources and structure inside your group. So first thing, be realistic about the contributions. If they're in an executive position and have a lot going on, set realistic tasks for them. Negotiate specific tasks. Be clear on what you need, the quality, the quantity, the time frame, the resources. Don't beat around the bush. Be very clear to say, I need this by this date. Can you do this? Be clear with them. Another option is make them a part-time team member. Kind of say, you're going to serve as an advisor, and I want your feedback. Deal with their item first on the agenda. Get that part done. With a part-time team member, I'm working with a group now, and they're a community group. And on the community group is a long-standing religious leader. And this person, very, very rarely checks their project management documentation, doesn't get any work done, doesn't bring any tasks to the piece. So eventually we realized, instead of fighting with this religious leader, to make them a advisory function. And now they give advice to the group, and the group changed the person's role to be effective to keep that person involved. It worked out pretty well. So that was kind of the archetypes I walked through in, like I said, about 30 minutes. I know there's probably a lot. We can talk about it in a couple minutes. So these are steps on kind of how to deal with a disruptive team member during the team meeting itself. So the ideas typically kind of start, my mouse. So we start, these are pointing. So it starts over here, kind of goes over here. So the first thing we do is normally, if somebody is acting up, right, the first thing we say tend to kind of ignore or avoid the process, let it go. Next step, as you're kind of escalating the procedure, or you're escalating the tension on this person to get things done. If it keeps happening, just make gentle eye contact. Make sure the person knows that there's a challenge. Sometimes just the eye contact will catch the person enough to know they're being challenging in a meeting, because you don't want to embarrass somebody early on. They may just have to reset themselves. If it keeps happening overall, you may want to stand up and sit back down. Sometimes breaking the cycle helps folks reset themselves. If it keeps happening, there's this sort of walk halfway to the individual and walk back. You just start walking towards them so they know that something is happening, and you're going to reset yourself and kind of walk back to the place. If the challenge keeps happening, you walk up to the person and you make direct eye contact with them. Now you're escalating the procedure in some ways. You kind of say, hey, this is what's going on. If it keeps happening, right, engage a person in a discussion. So what you may want to do is then kind of say, hey, during a break time, you may want to say, hey, Mike, can we talk? In the meeting, you keep talking an awful lot, and people aren't getting their ideas out. I need you to stop that and encourage your team to have more discussions in this piece. Or you may want to say, hey, Mike, during the meeting, I know you've been pretty quiet and disengaged. Is everything okay? Do we got to do something different for your work? Are you all right? Allude to disruptive behavior and redirect the person. Speak to them on a break. You'll speak to the individual in a meeting and involve the team. So if things are really bad, it has to be more and more disruptive, you eventually involve the team and get the team involved in the process. So this is sort of an example of how we use this. So I'm going to just kind of actually roll through this. You can read this on your own. We use the process to kind of get things done and make sure it works. But I do want to say there's two things to be thoughtful about as we're done with this. I'm going to stop the share screen, then we have a little Q&A piece. Hang on, sorry. So we walked through the archetypes, we clarified the challenges. One thing to keep being thoughtful of is this, and I'm going to use an example. I was doing some work with a Federal Reserve branch of the Federal Reserve Bank, and in the team, they were having a consistent challenge of retaining staff that were 35 and younger. And so they brought me in about 4 years ago, and they couldn't keep younger staff on the group. There's some major reasons for that. Reason number one was that most of the younger staff that are involved in banking typically don't want to go at this current time. They don't want to go to large bureaucratic hierarchical organizations. Most of the folks are getting their MBA degrees or their accounting degrees. They want to go to startups. They want to go to like a startup, and they want to kind of get early equity in the startup and be a billionaire by the time they're 30, which is kind of a folklore, but it's how things are. So with this team, the Federal Reserve group I was working with, we started changing some things around. So again, if you're a new team member in the group and you had ideas, and the senior team members, the tenure team, the folks who've been there for a long time, they were negative to any new idea or any negative feedback. And this process actually works really well across all the archetypes and most of the teams. So we started having the team members begin to brainstorm and write down ideas prior to coming to the meeting. So we'd have them do things like, we have to decide upon how we're going to implement procedure, whatever. Take 5 minutes and write down your response to procedure, whatever, and come to the meeting with your idea already thought out. And by having folks write down their ideas prior to the meeting, we were able to either A, capture that in documentation before they came to the meeting, or B, as they left the meeting, grab their notes and see the process. So you got to keep thinking about how do you work with these archetypes and how do you ameliorate the challenges. And so in closing, and then we'll get to Q&A in a little bit, you have to be thoughtful about this. Each of the steps can be challenging and different. And I'm sure some of you have specific examples you want to dig into that we'll get into. If you find that you have the raging bull, for example, go to the handout, the job aid, the task I'm going to email you, try some of the steps and see what happens. Also realize that organizationally inside your companies, you have HR, you have policy and procedures to work on things. You have to try to consistently just do your best. And when I'm working with team leaders or having hard team members, my response is, as long as you can say at the end of the day, you did your best and you gave that person your best effort to improve things, that usually is enough. Not everyone's going to come along. Another thing is this, being clear on what is the goal of the project, what are the roles we're going to be utilizing, what are the procedures will help kind of get things put together. All right, so I'm going to go into the Q&A. As I see I have a question, we'll go to the Q&A for a little bit. If more things pop up, you can either raise your hand or you can just ask me. I can take you off mute if you want to ask out loud. It's okay also, and we'll go through this. So I'm going to go to the first one. It looks like we got a question here from Hector. How do you recommend we handle team members that serve on multiple teams and are one, only difficult on certain teams, and two, are difficult in different ways on each team? Ooh, that's a tough one. All right, so I'll tackle the first part first. So team members that are difficult on certain teams. That's tough. So to me, it sounds like those people are choosing to be difficult on those teams. One thing to kind of come back to is, do we know what the goals of the team and project are? Do we know what the roles are for the process? Are they currently there? Do we know what that is? Have we defined the procedure? As people are working on these different teams, I begin to also, if I can, if I'm working with those team members on different teams, I begin to try to figure out what is different about the teams. So when person X is on, let's say, the quality improvement team, or they go to a safety meeting, how are they different? What's different about those teams? And you know that people will change or they'll adjust their behavior based upon folks they are with. So if they're difficult in certain teams, you need to figure out with that person what's going on. So it may be okay if you're going to pull them aside and say, hey, I noticed that when you're at this meeting with me, you behave this way. What's going on? Can we fix some things? Can we try some things? Or some ideas we can do? And if they're difficult in different ways on each team, it's also a tough one. So again, you have to kind of figure out with them how they're being difficult and what to do about that. And it goes through almost that level of escalation. So the first part is asking the team member and yourself, can the person do the work? Sometimes people act up because they can't actually get the work done. That's a skill issue. If they can do the work, do they know how to get the work done? Can they actually complete the tasks? If they know how to get the work done, they know why the work has to get done. We clarify why we're doing the work, the goal, the procedures, the processes. If they know why the work has to get done, they may feel that there's negative consequences for them actually doing the work. So in some teams, based upon the team project itself, the challenge is if you do good work on this team, your reward is you get more work to do. And that creates folks that behave negatively in some ways. So you got to think about, are there some negative consequences in the way for them getting their work done? The next part is saying, if there are negative consequences, are there positive consequences for getting the work done? Meaning as the work's getting done, are there ways they can get reinforced? And if all these things are in place and they keep being challenging, you may have to then kind of go back and then identify if the person is still worthy of being on the team. So my suggestion again is kind of go back, meet with that person, talk with them. If they keep being challenging, I would keep, in my mind, going from broader tasks to narrower tasks, saying, here's the work, and kind of keep bringing the tasks narrower until the person either kind of conforms or they kind of ultimately rebel and they bounce out. And it's a hard one. So that's a hard one. I see I got another question. What is HR or the organization sort of role inside this process? Again, I think that's oftentimes underutilized. So you have constraints and things inside your company that can help you with these pieces. But the worst part is when and we see this a lot in higher education, like in universities, and also in larger bureaucratic organizations, where a team member who is a known challenge or a known dysfunctional team member gets bounced from team to team to team to team to team because they can't get rid of that person or they don't want to terminate that person. When I'm coaching those processes, my response normally is, you work for a company that has high respect for individuals, meaning that the person, you're safe. And that's can be good for the culture of the organization. It can be challenging for productivity of the organization. So if someone keeps getting bounced around team to team to team to team to team, and they're on your team now because you're a good team leader, and you have to ensure that they are productive, you have to figure out tasks they can do or ways to stick them in a place where they can't cause too much damage. And unfortunately, that's what happens. So if you can keep them to a place where they're not causing too much damage, keep the tasks clear, keep their work clear, keep them minimally involved, that's the best you can do. We got another question. Good. What could be a strategy to engage quiet team members, especially when it comes to take over parts of the work with ownership and investigate how to get it done by themselves? Often, team members nod their heads when it comes to taking on tasks, but don't perform, and the manager has to take it over. All the work is stuck on the manager. So with the quiet team members, this is where I think in some ways you have to start identifying and documenting what the team members are expected to complete. So in your meetings, if you can create some sort of who, what, by when list, like an Excel spreadsheet, and normally the columns kind of says like task. So task is, by next week, compile all the documentation on this procedure. That's the who's doing that work, and sort of the who, what, when, and by when. We can start putting that into a spreadsheet and keeping that piece there and feeding it back. Because oftentimes the ones who are being quiet and they're not getting the work done, I'm going to make an assumption before I think they're being lazy or they're being challenging. My assumption is they don't know the work, or they're just getting confused, or they're not too clear on what the work is. So we go back to clarifying that. And I think in some ways developing that spreadsheet on what's the task we have to accomplish, who's doing the work, and the by when, and then you keep reflecting that back. And we reflect it back to the team as a whole, creating some kind of social pressure on that person to get the work done. Additionally, if they're not getting the work done and you're documenting it, you have some way now to talk to that person, kind of say you're not getting the work done. Also, if the person is incredibly quiet and they're not being engaged, you may want to just meet with them one-on-one. They may feel uncomfortable in the team. They may have a hard time getting stuff done. And the last part is taking over all the work and the work of the manager. That's tough. So my question sometimes I ask, and this is a tough question, is what happens if you didn't do it? Like what happens if you chose not to take that work on? What happens if you told the person, I'm not going to do this, you have to get this done? And you have to figure that piece out. It's tough. Next question, okay. How do you recommend we solve difficult behaviors that have been left to grow from a previous manager for years? Whew, you guys are throwing me some heat today. All right. So difficult managers that have been allowed, and behaviors that have been allowed to happen for a long period of time. This is when you have to have a serious discussion with the person, right? And again, most people I think are adults who will be able to handle this. Some folks won't. Some folks will kind of, some people will get stuck, and some people have been allowed to behave certain ways for a long period of time. That's historical sort of constructs. So the idea that my past manager let me leave work at 3:30 or take a 2-hour-long lunch or not get tasks completed, that's tough. And so the way to work through that is to, number one, bond with the person. Try to friend up, we say, become their friend. You don't want to kiss up or be sycophantic, but you want to also say, hey, we're together on this. We have to work together. Things are a little different. I want to now work with you from now going forward, how to get things done. Second part is like that veteran or that knowledge piece, tap into what they know and how they got to where they are, reignite them with what the process is. So friend up, use their knowledge. And the third part is begin to work with that person to craft the future goals they want to put in place. So keep them collaborative and sort of say, hey, going forward, here's the work we have to accomplish. I know in the past you didn't do these things, but we're going to work on these things. How can you and I do this together? So you may have to have the person believe or think that you're working with them and that you're using them to kind of help you move forward, and keep being nice in that process until it's no longer useful to be nice. And I mean that you keep being collaborative and you keep setting the boundaries. Although if they continue to not achieve the work or to miss those boundaries, then you're going to want to sort of pull the person aside at some point and say, I've asked you to accomplish the tasks, they're not getting done, and then deal with that. If you're stuck with a person, you're stuck with the person, but you have to figure out ways to make them work. Next question, and then we'll sort of, how do you handle team members who go above the management and invite the president to constantly get involved when they don't agree with the supervisor? So so people are triangulating. So again, let's say like Anand is my manager, right? And then sort of I'm working with them, and then my team member, or my staff member keeps level jumping me to go around me. What I do with that is, first thing I do with that is go talk to the management or the president and kind of ask them to stop that. Usually the people who are, let's say, your managers or or work for you, if they're being level jumped and you talk to them, they'll usually say, okay, I understand, I'll tell people to stop that. But you may want to go to them first and ask that to stop. Because normally that person, you're stuck in a triangle now, and the triangulation is very dangerous to you. So you have to figure out, how do you sort of play both ends? So part one is talk to the person they're going to and ask that person just to stop, but explain to them that you have work to accomplish, they have work to accomplish. If the person comes to you, boss, and asks you a question, ask them to come to me first, please. Try to negotiate that with the person to get the work done. If the person keeps triangulating you, you can pull them aside and just ask them to stop. And just say, hey, I know you keep going to the president about this, but please just stop it. It makes things harder. It makes the work harder to get accomplished, and we need to end that. But with that, you're kind of stuck. So the negative piece, honestly, is if that person who's on your team and the president have a close relationship, and it's happened historically, that's really hard to break, and you can't do much about it, unfortunately. I wish I had a better answer. You just got to find ways to deal with it. You got to find ways to deal with the communication. And one way to deal with that, again, is to start documenting what you're doing. So if a question comes up, you can pull up the notes and you're knowledgeable about your team and your teamwork. President gets involved to undermine the supervisor. Yeah, again, you're in a tough place there. And I mean that sincerely. Because again, that means the staff member and the president have formed a close relationship, and that's not being utilized to create a rift. So structurally, talk to the president or the executives above you that's being triangulated. Talk to the person, ask them to stop. If it still continues, figure out ways to kind of, CYA, kind of cover your ass and start documenting things that are currently going on and make sure the work's going on and do the best you can. Also realize sometimes with all these questions that are kind of coming up, at the end of the day, you may take a deep breath and kind of think to yourself, how much of this am I bringing on myself? How much is not in my control? So you can control your reactions. You can control your responses. You can control your level of competency. You can get new skill work. You can control how you document the work. You can control how you reach out to other team members. If they choose to not take those responses or your effort positively, you can't control that. If a team member chooses to triangulate and go to your boss and you ask them not to and they keep doing that, you also can't control that. So you got to stop, take a deep breath, and kind of figure out what areas can you be okay with and what areas you got to change. And also when I'm coaching folks, the thing I tell them too is start thinking about where your boundaries are and what is far enough for you to take a next step. So certain behaviors may be inside this okayable, what I call the okayable or K boundaries. I can accept these things, and they may annoy me. They may make me upset and angry. But I can accept these things. Certain things are outside my boundaries, and I can't accept these things. Once those external boundary pieces act up, you need to, in a polite, documented manner, go to the people and talk to them about this. If it keeps happening, you got to figure out what you're going to do about this. But again, on your team, and you have these certain archetypes, it's useful to have some skills to think about them and move through in the process. So that seems, oh, more questions. Okay, more questions. Hang on, sorry. What are your tips what are your tips for starting tough conversations about behavior with employees? Tips about so starting conversation. So the first thing is make an appointment. If you're let's use an example. So I'm on your team and I'm not getting my work done, being that I'm having a hard time with my time management. The important thing is to treat me as an adult. So you may want to sort of make a meeting with me and say, hey, Mike, listen, I've noticed that you're having a hard time getting the work done, or if I'm the raging bull, I noticed that you're causing a lot of arguments in the meeting. I want to have a meeting with you on this date at this time in this conference room to talk about these challenges. And there's some small things about the environment here. Number one, you're letting the person know what you're going to talk to them about. I'm not a big fan of like the surprise, we're going to have a conversation about your behavior meeting. I think when folks are surprised and you pull them into a room and they aren't prepared for it, they react negatively. It's like, it can be like a caged lion. Suddenly they explode. But if you give me a chance to kind of think about it and to respond and to prepare, then I feel that you at least give me the respect to think it through. Number two, if you're going to have the meeting in a neutral conference room. Don't have it in your office, because your office is still a domain where you have power and you have the it's your environment. Have it in a neutral conference room so the person feels that they're in a neutral territory. Number three, prior to the meeting starting, you have to prepare, meaning you have to kind of write down and document what your opening monologue is going to be. Normally I say the monologue should be about 1 minute, no longer, no shorter, about a minute. And that you're clarifying who the person is, what their role is in the task, and what the challenges are, and you're sharing some data or evidence to support those challenges. Even the data is sort of feelings. Like, hey, other team members, or not, ignore other team members. I feel in the meeting when you start acting this way, it makes it hard for us to make progress. So the monologue should be the person, the role they're filling in the organization, and also some evidence or some things you've noticed are making it challenging. And then give the person time to respond. Let them talk for a while, and you're just listening at this point. After they respond, then you kind of move into resolution and sort of say, so this is happening. I can tell neither you or I like this. What are some things we can do about this? And try to get the person to agree upon specific behaviors they can do to make things better. As that happens, you're going to work through it. It may be uncomfortable. The person may tell you just to suck mud or to F off and leave me alone, and you got to accept that. But again, you have to be thoughtful and you have to prepare. So don't wing it. Don't suddenly try to get too, don't do it when you're incredibly emotional or upset or angry. Try to be calm about it. Take some deep breaths. If and or when the other person gets upset, accept that. Let the person get upset, as long as it's not getting belligerent or angry, work through it and accept it. So again, challenging team member discussion is have a meeting, neutral grounds, write down your monologue, write down what you're going to say, share it with the person, let them respond, and then work through some next steps. One last thing. How do you recommend dealing with employees who assign tasks to others, sometimes peers, sometimes other leaders who assign tasks? Oh, how do you deal with employees who assign tasks? Kathleen, I'm not too sure I understand the question. Do you want to, sorry, deal with employees who assign tasks to others? Oh, so you mean like cross-functional employees? So, so for example, we have folks who are not true managers in the task. Oh, okay, good. So, she's not, so you have a team member who is just like a team member. There may be a specialist or a lead, they're quality, compliance, and they're asking for tasks to get done. So the one thing is, if they're not a supervisor, they're still a team lead, they still have work they have to get done, right? And so you have to kind of clarify what the person's role is in that piece. So is their role cross-functional? And there's a whole content section. If you want, Kathleen, you can email me and I'll send you some more information on this, on cross-functional team roles. So it's sort of saying, if team member A is working with team member B, and team member A asks team member B to do something, does that person have to do it? And in some of these peer relationships, if you're assigning tasks to me and you're not my direct manager, I may tell you, no, I'm not going to do the work. So again, with that, you want to kind of try to go back to what the project documentation is. What's the goals? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the roles? What are my roles? What's that person's roles? Who's the person assigning tasks? What are their roles? What's their accountability? What's their authority? And also go back to kind of saying, what kind of decisions have to get made that I'm accountable for? So if the team's output is my accountability, how do I clarify those questions and those decisions and make sure they're getting accomplished? And then from that, you have to kind of keep working that piece. And the last part is with that is sometimes if I'm that person and I'm trying to get folks to do work, I'm not their direct manager, you sometimes have to play within the organization. If the structure is not there, you have to become a little political. So you have to friend up, you got to create trust, and you have to get the work done. And the best way to do that, to be a good team member, is to have high reciprocity. So to ensure you're the team member who came through for others, who got the work done. So it is 11 o'clock now. So I'm going to tell you guys this. I'm going to record this. I'm going to send each of you a bunch more content on this. You'll get the slides. You'll get the article. If there is more you want, then please, most of you know me. If you don't know me, you know I'm very open to sharing things. Email me. I'll send you more content, and we can have more time to talk about this. So again, I want to thank you for your time. Again, I'm Mike Cardis. This is I'm Mike Cardis from Organization Development by Mike Cardis. We talked through the dealing with difficult team members process, and I will reach out to all you guys relatively soon.